And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Well, there you are. Welcome back to another edition of the Liberty Podcast. Today is March 8th, 2024, and we are back again in our beautiful, cozy, undisclosed studio location here in the beautiful Sandhills of North Carolina. We have a really quality podcast for you today, I believe. I can say that with a high degree of confidence. Stay with us till the end because we have a special guest joining us, an interview with a conservative up-and-comer who you may not have heard about yet, but who pulled off a major upset victory in Tuesday's primary election right here in Eastern North Carolina. We'll tell you all about young Wyatt Gable in our interview with him coming up at the conclusion of the podcast, near the last half of it, roughly. So now let's get into the dreadful, painful state of the dementia speech that we endured last night from the 46th resident of the United States, the occupant of the White House Senior Living Home on Pennsylvania Avenue. That would be none other than Joe Biden, who was, man, whatever cocktail of picker-upper they gave him for last night certainly brought out the angry, grumpy, sort of Freddy Krueger version of this already demented man. And gee, it really made you feel not only like not that great about being an American, but like, you know, a little apprehensive about, you know, the next several months leading into the fall and the election. What we're going to be hearing and subjected to is going to be probably unbearable. You may need to hide the children and re-up your meds with your doctor, if you know what I'm saying. But there were so many whoppers and doozies and flirtations with outright deception in the speech last night, the State of the Onion, that even none other than CNN could not ignore making some observations about what we heard. Let me quickly run through some of these with you. President Joe Biden delivered his annual State of the Union address on March 7th. His statements were mostly accurate, but he also made a smattering of claims that were false, misleading, and lacking key context. See, if you say something out of context or without proper context, then what you're saying could ultimately be almost false, if not entirely false. You see what I'm getting at? Biden repeated his familiar misleading, now this is CNN. Remember what I'm reading from. Biden repeated his familiar misleading boast about how he had supposedly reduced the federal budget deficit. Well, that is a doozy, isn't it? Gosh, you can't make this stuff up. So what he left out of those kind of claims and other data that he spewed throughout the speech was any connection between skewed numbers and the pandemic, which beset the concluding year of the Trump administration and spilled over, into the Biden regime that took power in January of 2021. For example, Biden criticized the fiscal management of President Trump and said that he added, quote, more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history. And then CNN says this: Biden's numbers are correct. The national debt rose from about 19.9 trillion to about 27.8 trillion during Trump's tenure, an increase of about 39%. But it is an oversimplification to blame presidents alone for debt incurred during their tenures. In fact, some of the Trump era increase in the debt was due to the trillions of dollars in emergency COVID-19 pandemic relief spending that passed with, wait for this, bipartisan support, and because of spending required by safety net programs that were created long ago by previous presidents, including Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which always consume the vast amount of funds in federal government spending. The national debt has continued to increase under Biden. As of the day before his address, it was at about 34.4 trillion, an increase of about 24%. And right now, economists are telling us that we're adding about $1 trillion to the debt every 100 days. So on that trajectory, Biden's comment is going to end up coming back to bite him in his shriveled little rear end. Let's keep going, because there's more from CNN, folks. This is good stuff. Biden said, I've been delivering real results. We've already cut the federal deficit by over $1 trillion. Here's CNN's take on that. As in past remarks, Biden didn't explain that the primary reason the deficit fell by a record amount during his tenure was that it had skyrocketed to a record high at the end of Trump's term because of bipartisan emergency pandemic relief spending, then fell as expected when that spending expired. Yeah, this stuff doesn't, this is not the product of policy. This is the product of a once in a lifetime Chinese bioweapon unleashed on our country that President Trump's had to deal with in cooperation with a bipartisan Congress at that time, when everybody thought the world was going to end because of COVID. Don't forget that. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office projects that the deficit will slightly decline in 2024 to about 1.5 trillion. Regardless, all of the Biden-era deficits are among the biggest in U.S. history. All right, Biden claims record 15 million new jobs in 3 years. The U.S. economy added about 14.8 million jobs between Biden's first full month in office, February 21, and January 2024. More jobs than were added in any previous 4-year term. However, it's important to note that Biden took office in an unusual pandemic context that makes meaningful comparison to other periods very difficult. Biden became president less than a year after the U.S. economy had shed 22 million jobs over 2 months, pandemic, March 2020 through April 2020. The jobs recovery then began immediately after that, under then President Trump, but there was still an unprecedented hole to fill when Biden took office. Nonetheless, Biden is free to argue that his stimulus legislation and other policies have helped the country gain jobs, but he's juiced the economy with federal spending of money that we don't have. So to the extent that those jobs may have been created, quote unquote, they have been created while growing our already enormously ticking debt bomb. It's quite preposterous that the logic behind why these things are happening is completely warped. But of course, Biden doesn't know what he's saying. He's reading a teleprompter. Now, here's the other big one, the doozy here, that crime is on the downswing under the Biden regime. The preliminary data published in 2023 by the FBI, running through the third quarter of the year, showed that violent crime was down about 8.2% compared to the same period in 2022. But notes CNN and its two reporters, Daniel Dale and Piper Hudspeth Blackburn, as always, whether crime is rising or falling, it's important to note that it is notoriously difficult to pinpoint the reasons that crime has increased or decreased at any given time, since there is a long list of economic, social, and political factors at play, and the impact of any president on these is unclear. By the way, another thing that I would argue is that many of these major cities deliberately defunded their law enforcement beginning in 21 into 22. And then what did we see? A massive spike in crime and violence and murder and carjacking and the whole roster of chaos. Well, all of a sudden, these mayors started looking around and saying, what have we done here? This is spiraling out of control. And so they slowly have begun to send funding back to restore the operations of the police departments and other law enforcement agencies. So it's entirely possible that we will not know until maybe a year from now what this refunding has done. And I guarantee you that the president of the United States, so-called Joe Biden, had nothing to do with it. That was done out of desperation by lefty mayors and state governors, believe me. Now, our friends at the Heritage Foundation also did a little fact analysis from the State of the Dementia speech via their daily publication called The Daily Signal. Now, wouldn't you know it, by the way, when Biden started crowing about the unemployment rate being historically low in his remarks, this morning there was a jobs report. 275,000 jobs were added, and the unemployment rate went up this morning in February to 3.9%. So it is up again under Biden. So we've got some good stuff here from the Heritage Foundation through its Daily Signal. Here's one that I loved. Okay, Biden called the COVID-19 pandemic, quote, the worst economic crisis in a century, end quote. So he did mention that while also rattling off all of these so-called statistics that show how many things are improving under his presidency. But calling it the worst economic crisis in a century, that's objectively incorrect, reports the Daily Signal. The Great Depression, which lasted from 1929 to 1941, resulted in 24.9% of Americans being forced into unemployment. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in the second quarter of 2020, unemployment hit 13%, and that pandemic only lasted 2 years, not 12 years like the Great Depression of the 30s into 1941. Gotta love this one. Biden twice took credit for cutting the federal deficit. CNN got into this data as well. He said, that's not just saving seniors money, it's saving taxpayers money, cutting the federal deficit by $160 billion because Medicare will no longer have to pay exorbitant prices to big pharma. And now it's my goal to cut the federal deficit another $3 trillion more by making big corporations and very wealthy people finally, you know what's coming, pay their fair share. However, the Heritage Foundation reminds us through its senior policy analyst, David Ditch, the federal budget deficit is set to increase every year for the next decade. When deficits get too high, as happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, it adds to inflationary pressures on the economy. If current trends continue, driven by the growth of the spending as a share of the economy, deficits will balloon even in years without a recession or a major war. So you see, you just can't make this stuff up. These guys who follow these numbers day in and day out for a living, they don't blink when they hear this. They know exactly what he's trying to get away with, and they call him on it every time. It never fails. Of course, probably the highlight of the evening, if you're looking for reasons to to despise the Biden regime came when, under taunting by Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Joe Biden was finally forced to identify the slain University of Georgia nursing student murdered and disfigured by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela while she was running outside of the University of Georgia, Athens, Georgia campus several weeks ago. He finally was forced to, in the words of Marjorie Taylor Greene, say her name. And what did he do? He mispronounced her name because he doesn't care about people. Her name is Laken Riley, like lake, the word lake with an N on the end of it, Laken. He referred to her, of course, as Lincoln, like Abraham, Lincoln Riley. It was so embarrassing. And you can only imagine her family members, how they must have felt as he was first forced to say the name, to even acknowledge that it happened because of his botched lack of border policy and the fact that this guy was not only let in the country, but then arrested for a crime and let go in New York before he killed again. Here's the other one. Biden said that he's going after corporations who have raised their prices to pad their profits. However, the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed prices for both business and consumers have increased 18% on average since Biden took office. So they're not padding, they're reacting. Here's a public economist and research fellow from the Heritage Foundation, E.J. Antoni, who's one of the best. He makes a very simple point. Grocery stores cannot simply reduce the prices they charge while the prices they themselves pay continue to rise. If a dairy farmer charges a grocer 20% more for milk, then the grocer also will charge a family 20% more for milk. See how that works? You know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, and I certainly am not a big numbers guy, but I know where to go for the good stuff, and one of them is the Heritage Foundation. Now, you're going to see that theme repeat itself here momentarily because I want to share with you some key snippets from the Tucker Carlson Network and Tucker Carlson himself last night in a live stream following the State of the Onion, in which was presented by Heritage Foundation on Tucker's streaming network, TCN. And in the course of dissecting the speech, he also had on as his guest the ever insightful and brilliant Victor Davis Hanson. So let's go take a look at a few clips from that, and then we'll come right back here to the Liberty Podcast studio. See you shortly.
Professor, thank you very much for coming on. I want to start right at the outset, and I save this sound for your analysis because I think it'll be smarter than mine, of the signature moment of the night, which was Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia confronting Joe Biden as he spoke. And here's what happened next.
I'd be a winner. Not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
So what did you make of that? What does that mean, do you think?
Well, I've never seen in general an angrier speech. I mean, I
Yes.
think the left's happy because he didn't stumble, but he only is incoherent when he's full of venom and he's angry. Get off
Yes.
my... This was Phantom of the Opera #2, and I've never seen a president interact and yell at the opposition. And you know, Tucker, he attacked the Supreme Court, and he was having a dialogue, an invective against the Supreme Court justices. I think they think that lying on the border and lying on the budget and lying about abortion and lying about all these things will be resonated because they have confidence in the media. They feel they control social media, traditional media, new media, entertainment, and this will just reverberate. and as what you see every night on network news or MSNBC. The staples that make life possible, fuel and food and shelter, have gone up 30%, and he doesn't care. And when they look at the border, it's 8 to 10 million people who are swarming into the United States, and he doesn't care. And when you look at abroad, you know, he kept talking about Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. You want to think, okay, there's been 4 administrations. When did Putin go in? He didn't go in during Donald Trump, but he went in during Bush, and he went in Obama, and he went in yours. And you talk really tough on Ukraine, but you were the one that fled in disgrace from Afghanistan. You told the country you wouldn't react if it was a minor invasion of Ukraine. I think they're going to be desperate. I think you're absolutely right about what the contours of the next election are going to be. It's going to be Donald Trump is January 6th, beat that dead horse. It's going to be abortion. It's going to be Donald Trump lawfare. And then it's going to be confidence in 70% of the electorate not voting in person on election day.
Well, I believe that Victor Davis Hanson really said it best, that Joe Biden came into office beginning in January of 2021 and, quote, the world fell apart. And it's still crumbling as we speak. Believe me, it's not getting any better. And we just still got to get through all of 2024, for Pete's sake, and it's only March. Now, before we go to our great interview with young Wyatt Gable, I have to share this one with you. This is going to go down as the Bud Lighting of systemic racism. Remember, Bud Light brought us the famous transy spokesperson, and lost what was it, $27 million in market cap or something? You know, unbelievable. So now you've got the Bud Lighting of systemic racism, brought to us by none other than the North Face Company. Now, we all are familiar with the North Face brand. It's been around for years. They predominantly manufacture outerwear, you know, fleece jackets, I guess some ski wear, lots of outer layers for the great outdoors, you might say. Well, they're a little worried about the great outdoors because you know why? The great outdoors pose a dilemma for their black customers. Now, you're not going to believe this. The North Face Company is offering customers a discount if they complete an equity course that teaches how white people never experience racism and how, quote, the outdoors is oppressive against black people. The course offers customers 20% off for learning about anti-racism for 1 hour. Here's what the North Face spokesperson had to say about the course that they're so proud of. The North Face has always believed the outdoors should be a welcoming, equitable, and safe place for all. This course aims to bring light to the barriers to entry, preventing all people from sharing equally rewarding experiences in the outdoors. Well, how about, are they worried that not enough of their black customers are being attacked by bears or venomous snakes? Or what is the problem? I have a feeling that this 20% off is going to manifest itself in a 20% hit to their bottom line at North Face. They will join. You can go out and buy some North Face for about pennies on the dollar with a case of Bud Light and have yourself a good old time here in the near future. I have a feeling. Now, I've been mentioning throughout the course of today's podcast here on March 8, 2024, that we are going to bring you a fascinating conversation with Wyatt Gable. He is a 21-year-old junior at East Carolina University who, on election primary day, last Tuesday, 5 March, did something that no one could have predicted. As a novice candidate running in the State House District 14 in North Carolina, representing Onslow County, Wyatt Gable defeated 10-term House member George Cleveland, age 84. And how did he do it? Well, he's going to tell us. He's going to provide his vision for the future. He's going to talk about his campaign coming up in the general election this fall against a Democrat. And I think he's going to make your day. So please enjoy it and join us again next week right here for the More Liberty podcast. See you then. Welcome back to the Liberty Podcast. And today we are excited about having a very inspired guest joining us, Wyatt Gable, Wyatt the Pirate from East Carolina University, where he is a junior. And in his spare time, he decided to mount a primary election campaign against a 10-term member of the NC House, George Cleveland. That was not George, that's my dog. And guess what happened? First-time candidate Wyatt Gable wins with 50.98% of the vote. And now he gets to go to the general election in the fall, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this is really exciting, Wyatt, and I'm so happy you were able to join us today. You are a student at East Carolina in Greenville, but you are a resident of Jacksonville on the coast. Is that right?
That is correct. Go Pirates, and ready to represent the district in November.
So let's go back to the beginning. What was the moment in time when you said to yourself, I need to mount a primary campaign against a very well entrenched member of the General Assembly in Raleigh?
Well, the decision itself was made this past summer. We were, a lot of discussion and conversation about it, and that's when the true decision was made. But the idea came about back in, my senior year of high school, freshman year of college, with all the COVID stuff going on. I just realized this wasn't about safety; it was about control. And I reached out to what would be my future opponent, and I never heard anything back from him. So kind of just been, it's not acceptable to just, pick and choose your friends that you respond to. And I just wanted to be a difference and make a difference in people's lives.
So I know that many of us, and this is Wyatt Gable we're talking to, who is the newly minted candidate for the general election this fall in NC District 14. And he was the victor on Tuesday night against entrenched George Cleveland. What a story. This is one of the great stories of the day from last Tuesday. Super Tuesday, definitely for you, it was. So I remember my own frustrations during the pandemic. I expected, radical Democrats like Governor Cooper to enjoy the power trip of locking down everything and keeping kids at home from schools against all, common sense. And you obviously had the same reaction. So you reached out to George Cleveland, and what were you asking for, and what response would you have expected if he bothered to get back to you?
I was just reaching out because, especially at ECU, it was really just like a communist state with all the rules that were implemented. It was if you had to wear your mask everywhere, bus, classroom, everything, but then you could go to the basketball game and not have to wear one where there's 4,000 people around. So make sense. And then if you weren't vaccinated, which I'm not, you had to get tested every week. And then if you didn't get tested, you had to, they'd turn off your student ID, so you couldn't get food at the dining hall or buy anything with your card like that. So I was just total control. So I just reached out asking, is this actually legal? Or could you just at least, hear my concerns about it? And then, at the very minimum, I just a response saying, there's nothing I can do, or, maybe we can talk about it. I just didn't even get a response. So that's kind of how it was.
So you started campaigning. When did you launch your campaign?
I informed everyone around me in June that I was doing it, and then through August I'd go speak at our county GOP meetings and events like that, and make sure my presence was known, and then made the logo and the designs for everything in early November, and then set up the exploratory committee, and then filed in December.
Wow. So what were your objectives on the campaign trail? In other words, what what was your message, which obviously resonated with people, 50.9% of the voters, at least. What was the secret to, maybe it's an open secret now, I guess, but what was effective for you in defeating this entrenched candidate?
Yeah, I think there was the biggest thing for me was getting out and meeting the voter. I mean, I myself alone, not even including my team that helped me out, I myself knocked over 1,000 doors and then probably made another 400 phone calls. So just getting out and actually meeting the voter, I know people really appreciate that because no one does anymore. I had dozens of people when I'd knock, they'd be, I'm going to vote for you simply because you're out here. I haven't had anyone knock on my door ever, or it's been 15 years, something like that, and that was the biggest thing. And then just another big part of it is a lot of people are just ready for something new. I mean, if someone's been in there for 20 years, they're people, okay, well, you kind of get complacent. So we want someone fresh and something new that we can, be excited about.
Well, that was certainly the response you got, obviously. Now your opponent is by all measures, a conservative fiscal Republican. And I think that I'm sure you agree with him on a number of issues, but what in particular will you be pursuing in your general election campaign against obviously a Democrat? What will be your key messages for the voters in the fall?
A lot of the same things that we ran on for the primary. I'd speak about education reform, talking about how I want to teach simple things like home economics, auto repair, carpentry, things like that. So students are prepared for the real world when they leave high school, and also emphasis on physical education and sports participation, because those obviously resonate. Everyone, no matter you're Republican or Democrat, you want your children or grandchildren to succeed. Then another big one is the Chinese Communist Party owns 11,000 acres in North Carolina. So I want to use eminent domain to buy it all back and then sell it to North Carolinians. So, those big talking points, but then just, the contrast of a Republican versus a Democrat. I mean, we see how horrible a job of the Democrats have done since they've taken control of the White House and the Senate and things. So just, relaying that is we've done such a great job at our state level with our supermajority Republican legislature. So no need to change that.
Mm-hmm. So you're not only taking on a Democrat, you're also going to take on the Chinese Communist Party. That's a big lift. But that eminent domain approach, if it's viable, why hasn't it been done, do you suppose, to this point?
Well, it's a simple solution, and simple solutions are often overlooked nowadays. I mean, everyone tries to think of some fancy way to solve problems when in reality, the simplest ways you can solve the problem is probably the best way. And that's probably the only answer, because we have a bill now, or that has passed, that says they cannot buy any more land, which is great, and I fully support that, but it only does so much when you've already got 11,000 acres here. So we need to retain that back ourselves.
Right. Absolutely. Well, when you win in the fall, I will look forward to seeing you tackle that project to restore that acreage to American ownership. Kind of makes common sense, doesn't it? You alluded to education and reform to the degree, I guess, that you're obviously at a 4-year university, and you tell me again your major.
Business management. So yeah, I just
a little
going on that
science.
more a little bit. It's kind of like in high school, for me especially, it was always you do this to go to college, do the, get this scholarship, do this, and I'm thinking, well, that's great for me because I want to go to college, but what about all the kids that want to go to the Marine Corps or a trade school or just go straight into the workforce? You're just kind of neglecting them. You're not preparing them like you're preparing me for college.
Well, I think that's a theme that is beginning to spread in public education reform. I know it's true here in Moore County, where I am, that it's becoming obvious that we do a disservice to young people when we convince them that there's only one track, which is the 4-year university, when in fact we live in a state that has what is known as the Great 58, which is 58 community colleges from Murphy to Manteo, and they have the opportunity to open the door to the vocational track for a young person who wants to pursue a career that, actually might land them a job, which is, the four-year universities seem to have forgotten that that when it's over, needs to be something viable at the end, other than the diploma.
Yeah.
Now, I guess that's your mindset, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was again, I chose college because I felt like that was the right path for me. And I'm very thankful I did because I found Turning Point and I've been able to really make a lot of connections through that. But I know I had a lot of friends in high school, they wanted to go to the Marine Corps or they wanted to go to a trade school or something like that. And then they just didn't have the resources for someone to help them in the school system because they've just been neglected because most people are thinking, well, if you don't go to college, well, what are you going to do? Well, there's plenty of other options. Now you just got to help them find those options and then support them in their choice.
Right. And for those who are about to graduate and haven't figured it out, I guess they could just take a few months and volunteer on your campaign and give you some help. Free.
Yeah, we'll take all the help we can get.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Turning Point USA. I followed Turning Point, the evolution of it, for a number of years now. And for our viewers who aren't aware of it, it's basically an organization formed by a young man named Charlie Kirk, who, if I'm correct, never attended college himself, by design. And he formed Turning Point USA to go onto the college campuses and literally to set up fortresses of conservatism and challenge young college students in sort of informal debates over the issues, and to show them how wrong they were about so much. And apparently you embraced that chapter coming to East Carolina University, and I believe you became the chapter president at one point. Is that right?
That's correct. I joined my freshman year and was really involved from the beginning. And then last year and this year and still currently, I'm the chapter president. So my term's coming to an end after this year. I can only serve 2 years, but it's been great, and I'll still be with it involved next year. But yeah, a lot of my successes because of Turning Point. I made so many connections and learned so much about campaigning, and it was all thanks to them. That's a huge part of why I got elected to be the Republican nominee.
And what has been the impact of the presence of Turning Point on the ECU campus? Do you feel like you've been able to open some eyes and some minds?
I definitely think so. I mean, we table outside, just have your table set up, have your little buttons and stickers, and then give your spiel about what you're about. And we've gotten, I mean, about 1,000 people since I've been there signed up to be a part of it. So, at least they're interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of Instagram followers, so we can put our message out there. And again, we know being a conservative is not the easiest thing to do on a college campus. So if we feel like we give people a group of like-minded individuals, you can always have someone that you can bounce ideas off of and talk about whatever you want, because, if you're in the classroom, a lot of times you're just going to get shunned. So
mm-hmm. Where would you rate ECU on the woke scale compared to we know some of the universities in North Carolina are way up there, 8, 9, 10, scale, UNC Chapel Hill and Woke Forest and Duke. Where does ECU fall on that spectrum?
In terms of the student body, I think the student body is very conservative compared to other colleges, which is great. And then the administration, I think certain parts of it are very liberal and, far out there to the left. But a decent amount are, very moderate people, and I would get along with them great. But there's always those little groups like the DEI and all them. They wanted to change the bathrooms at ECU so men can go in women's and vice versa. So you always have those groups, but as a whole, it's not too bad.
Did they fail in their quest to transgenderize the bathrooms?
Yes, me and my chapter were able to stop that from happening. So no, we still have normal bathrooms at East Carolina.
All right. Well, there's a campaign ad right there.
Absolutely.
Waiting to happen. Now, you mentioned as well that you are not a big fan of the status quo Republican Party, and that in fact in Jacksonville, where you live, there is an organization that was formed called Act Right, which you support. What does Act Right endeavor to do in that part of the state that is in contrast to the either the rhinos or the status quo Republican Party.
Yeah, it's just, the simplest way to put it is it's just a group of conservative people that weren't happy with the GOP and they wanted to have their own say in things, and that's what happened. And then again, it's kind of the GOP as a whole is very divided right now, and that's kind of why that happened. And that's unfortunate because if everybody was on the same page, we'd be able to accomplish so much more. And that's a big thing I want to try and work on is, especially around my area here, it's a lot of division and there's different factions among the conservative side. And I just want to say, we all want the same thing. And I know we might have our disagreements about each other and things, but if we just come together, we're going to be so much better off because Onslow County is incredibly red, but we have horrible voter turnout. And if you were to get everybody on the same page, if you get 10, 15,000 more Republicans to vote around here, that's obviously not going to make a difference because you're winning everything. But on like the Senate side, the gubernatorial side, president side, that could be the difference in an election right there.
Absolutely. Yes, here in Moore County on primary day, I think the turnout was 29%, which is, pretty pathetic. That was countywide, Democrats and Republicans, but that needs to
I think ours was right around 19, 20%, so it was worse.
Yeah, I hear you. So we know we've established that you are an intelligent young man with a great future, and that you love your country enough to really do some uncomfortable things, which I think running for office is not everybody's go-to for sure. What else do we need to know about you? Do you enjoy any particular athletic endeavors or any other? What else will you be aspiring to do as you enter the real world soon?
I mean, I love my athletics. I play a lot of intramural sports at ECU. I run club track, so big sports fan.
Excellent.
In terms of what's next, trying to get through the rest of this semester, enjoy the summer, get my summer job. So I'm still a college student, so I got to worry about that. And then find my real job after I finish school to partner with the legislative position.
Sounds great. Well, you're probably going to have a little edge on summer job applications now that you'll be able to say candidate for NC-14. But we wish you the best, Wyatt. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Liberty Podcast here on March the 8th. And we will look forward to following your quest to become an elected member of the North Carolina General Assembly. All the best to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.